So as I speak this affirmative prayer for all of us, this is called the healing meditation, I want you to take it into, as I speak these words, I'm asking you, if you can, to take it into your place, your first person. As we come together this morning, opening up to the truth that God is truly all there is, we align ourselves with that goodness, that power, that love, that potentiality, that possibility. So we take a moment to imagine for each and every one of us a possible challenge or dis-ease that we may be facing, whether it be physical or emotional or spiritual, financial, maybe a feeling of isolation, a feeling of being cut off, a feeling of less than, a feeling of low self-worth, low self-image. We allow ourselves to sit in the presence of that for just a moment and to feel that and to see that. Imagine for a moment that it is a distance in front of us. So we create a healthy boundary between ourselves and it. But we observe it, we look at it, and we feel it. And so now, as we begin to imagine the light of Spirit, the love of Spirit, the warmth of Spirit, however that shows up for each and every one of us personally, a particular color, a particular feeling, a particular image, we allow that boundary to widen. And gently and lovingly, the boundary begins to push the challenge, the dis-ease, the discomfort further and further away from us. And in the space between ourselves and that boundary, there is a wonderful road that emerges. The road to moving into the next incarnation of our experience. So we find ourselves taking that road, following the light, following the love, following the truth of who we truly are. So we allow ourselves to inhabit that new ideal, that new consciousness, that new thought, that new space. This power that has widened that space, enforced our boundary, is called God. And it radiates for us, from us. We work in conjunction with this energy, in knowing the truth of ourselves, the ultimate truth of ourselves. And we are so grateful for this. And in that gratitude, we let ourselves go with the word of, and so it is. So it is. Thank you. Thank you, practitioners. That's great. So the prayer that I am honored to have offered up sets the stage for what I want to talk about today. So now I'm going to put you into my shoes for a moment, or into the shoes of these wonderful people who stood up. I have a question for you today, and I want to construct the premise of that question. And I want us to consider that question from the standpoint of the philosophy that is taught in this center, the philosophy that is Centers for Spiritual Living, the philosophy that has been brought down to us through many generations of wonderful metaphysicians, including Ernest Holmes. So let me lay out the premise. I want you to imagine yourself sitting in some wonderful tower somewhere, some golden place, and you're sitting next to a telephone. And your job in this golden tower is to receive phone calls for people who are reaching out for something, reaching out for inspiration. And so whenever the phone rings, you pick it up, and your job is to listen to what is being sought out there from the standpoint of this teaching, of this philosophy. That's your job. So I want you to imagine the phone rings, and the individual on the other end of the line is absolutely, completely distraught and filled with emotions. And those emotions are pretty dark. And they're talking about how, and I'm going to use some strong language here, the dumpster fire of their life. How everything is just really screwed up. And it has been for a long time, going way back. And they begin to lay out the long road of carnage and everything that stretches out behind them in this life journey, and they go on and on and on. And the more they go on, the more distraught they become, the tears, the anger, all of that is coming through. And even though it's a phone call and they're somewhere else and you're here, you start to even feel that energy. It's a very pronounced energy, a very dark and deep energy. So they're talking about events. Now, I want you to tune your hearing, because there's a subtlety that begins to happen. And the subtlety is that they're beginning to identify with the carnage. In other words, they're not just talking about what happened. They're saying that carnage is an I am statement. I am the carnage. I am what's wrong. I don't know why I'm in this world. I have no idea. I am darkness. I am the worst possible image of a person you can even imagine. And so you let that go on for a while. But this subtle turn is really interesting. And the reason that turn is interesting is because we would say in our philosophy that nobody actually inhabits that identity. So now this is my question. They speak, they talk, and finally they wear themselves out, and they've begun to slow down because they've expended all this energy, and you get a space to tell them something. What is it that you would tell them about the truth of who they are? A child of God, totally loved. God is their source. Anybody, what? Life has infinite possibilities. They are one with God. They are transformative energy. I can hear you. Anybody else? Yeah. Things change. This too shall pass. That's an interesting statement. I want to ask a question about that statement. The question was, what would you say to them about them? And that person was, this too shall pass. What does that say about them? I'm sorry? They shall pass too. They shall evolve too. They shall grow too. They are in pain. And what is it to understand in that pain generally? All right. Now, so you say these wonderful things to them. And now this is the next question. They say, prove that to me. All these wonderful things you're saying, prove that to me. What would you say? Okay? It's done unto you as you believe. How about this? You called. What is that? Isn't that interesting? I have had the opportunity in my lifetime, especially in two areas of my employment in the past. In the world of corrections as a counselor, in the world of addiction as a counselor, I have had the opportunity in both of those places to have people who will tell me how they are the dregs of the earth. And I will listen, I will listen, I will listen. And then I ask the question, or I present the idea, but you're here. If you are as horrible as you say you are, why are you here? Isn't that interesting? Why are you here? You see, the title today, Elegant Simplicity, the reason I chose that is because some years ago I was doing a Science of Mind class in a center, and we were way deep into the Science of Mind book and Ernest Holmes and stuff, and there was someone who said, they said to me, Holmes' stuff is so overly simplistic, but so difficult to live. They looked at me like for wisdom. And you know what my wisdom was? Yeah, you're right. That's it. You're right. Listen to kind of how simplistic this is, this idea, but it doesn't mean it's not profound. It doesn't mean it's not deep. I think the depth of it is what blows our mind. But the simplicity of it. Why did you call? And so, a lot of times in spirituality we talk about these voices we hear, the voices within, right? And unfortunately, the person who made the phone call, we can all imagine what those interior voices are like, especially when he gets into the I am, the low self-esteem, the low self-worth, the not being enough, right? And how thick and heavy and deep those voices can be. I remember at a time in my life where I made a really big shift in my life because my life had gone in a really bad direction, which is a whole nother story. I was talking to a psycho-spiritual counselor, and I will always be grateful for her. Because I went to go see her this one week, and I had messed something up. And so I walk in, Andy, how are you doing? Okay, here it comes. I'm going to let you have it. And the stuff I said about myself was so horrendous. 4-letter words, all kinds of things. And she sat there. And when I finally talked myself out, she said, Andy, whose voice is that? Well, it's my voice. I'm the only one in the room. She said, who was the first voice? Oh, whoa. Her point was, this has come to you in some way, and you have given it sanction, and so now you own it. But why are you in this office? Ernest Holmes in his work talks a lot about mind. Obviously, science of mind, spiritual mind treatment. And today I want to talk about 3 aspects of this, but I want to take the genius of Holmes, and I want to add something that's a little bit more contemporary, just in terms of verbiage. I want to bring in the word domestication. I want you to think for a moment about the idea of human domestication. We think of the domestication of our 4-legged friends and family members, but I want to talk about our domestication. For those of you who have children, if you remember them when they were little kids, just how outrageous they were. There's a picture in my mind of my daughter as a little kid, and she's standing in the backyard of the place we were living in at the time, and she was probably around, she was a little bit past the terrible 2s, bumping up 3, 4 years old, something like that. This is during a time when those tchotchke big sunglasses were popular. They were huge, right? So she's in the backyard. She's standing there. She's got the big sunglasses on. And she's got, one of those little princess crown things in. Then she's wearing her brother's football jersey. And then down below that, she's wearing a tutu. And if you went lower, she's wearing cowboy boots. And she's holding this big bag of Fritos that was as big as she was, and she was just bad. You know what I'm saying? I love that. I love that. That's so undomesticated. Here I am. She got up in the morning and put that together. It reflected who she was. And today, my daughter, because she's in her, I can't even believe this, she's my baby. She's in her early 40s. And I know that there's days she gets up and has a hard time being her bad self because of what she's accumulated over the years. So the three parts of mind, let's think of those as consciousness. I want to think of them as domestication. The first one is what I would call intimate domestication. This is the narrow and close dimension of looking at ourselves. These are the people that when we come into this world, we're sharing a home with them. We're sharing a last name with them. Maybe we're sharing a neighborhood with them. Maybe we share them as close, but just a little bit ancestral grandparents, uncles, aunts, whatever, that domestication. Okay, let's teach you who you are. Let's influence your self-esteem. Let's influence your self-worth. And in a way that would be, let's call it unhealthy, it would be, well, you spilled the milk on the floor, but you're also the spilled milk. In psychology, what do we call that? Shame. Shame. You're not just the fact you spilled the milk, you are the spilled milk. And maybe if we hear that enough times, that's the voice that we begin to borrow later on when we do something wrong. The second level of what we would call mind is what Holmes, I think, would talk about in terms of, and he talks a lot about this, materially based, and I'll say domestication. I also want to say institutional. I'm going to break those two down. Materially based. I'm not thinking about, collecting Cadillacs here. I'm talking about we go to the doctor's office and there is a diagnosis, and by the way, this is who you are. It's not just that you have something, it's what you are. I am a blank patient. And the only way that we're going to be able to deal with you is if we come in on the effect side. In metaphysics, we talk a lot about creation is brought about through cause and effect. This whole conversation we're having about who we think we are and how we talk about ourselves is the cause. The effect is something else. And the material world comes into everything as an effect. We're going to give you medicine. We're going to give you treatment. We're going to give you a lawsuit. We're going to give you a judgment. We're going to give you a key to a new home. It's all on the effect side. Ernest Holmes would say of these two areas, and this is a quote from him, as being prolific causes of disease operating through our receptivity to them. When we're young growing up, why do we have that receptivity? Because they're it, man. You're the big people. Parents, teachers, police officers. You're the big, okay, you must know what it is to be here. I'm relying upon you. And so we're just like a sponge, man, and we're taking it in. Oh, this is what you think of me? Okay. our receptivity to it. Later on, it's the receptivity of I walk into someone's office and they got all those diplomas up there. Well, they must know more than I do. They have a title, too. You ever realize how powerful titles are in our life? Mom, dad, aunt, uncle, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, whatever it is. Those titles. And so okay. Minister. Wow. I know as a minister, sometimes that makes me uncomfortable. I don't get it from you guys. I get it from, you know better, right? But I get it out there. Oh, Reverend Andy. Oh, Reverend. Oh, really, don't bother. You have no idea, right? Okay. I had to do this because I was more screwed up than you, okay? I just took more classes, okay? I prayed more, And then one day, all of a sudden, there was a title. I was like, okay, But there's a third idea of mind and consciousness, and it's what the theme of this entire morning's been. And if you listen to Rod's beautiful song and you listen to the affirmations and the prayers, is from the space of a universal and mystical vantage point. Spirit's uplifted perspective, potentiality, and possibility. So, that phone call that you took earlier, why did that person call? I want a different perspective, man. Because down here in this dark place I am, this perspective is kicking my rear end. I need a different perspective. And you guys showed up in it. So I want to ask you another question. Could we, if we were to take all of that and then put it into a box, could we call that love? We hear all the time about, we associate love with God, and love is this high idea of spirituality. So in other words, this exercise we did, as you answering that phone, would you say you were showing up in love? We could call that all love, right? Okay. That's great. If you'd said something else, I'd been, I don't know what I'd do. Okay. So a lot of you have been reading a book this last year called The Return of the Mother, Return of Love. And the woman who brought it forward was Sharon. Oh, man. Why do they always have weird last names? McErlane. And the reason I'm struggling is because I guess this is either Irish or Scottish, because there's a capital E and a capital L in there. I've never seen that before. I've seen capital C's and, but McErlane. Okay. She brought this forward. And I love this quote. And in two places, I did I'm doing a little bit of an editorialization. In two places, she uses the word ego, but I want to use the term domesticated self. Is that okay? All right. So when you hear that, the real word is ego. And she writes, keep it simple, very simple, on the plane which is non-material and therefore not part of the mind trap. I love that. You know that person who called earlier? Were they in a mind trap? Yeah. That was a really nasty, ugly, dirty, dumpster fire, mind trap. And therefore not part of the mind trap. This next line is gorgeous too. Moving beneath the snares of the mind. The snares of the mind. Because the mind may judge this approach. Because the mind is ruled by domesticated self. Begin now to unify with spirit beyond the domesticated self. The most profound action one can take, ? When you are happy, love. When you are sad, love. When in doubt, love. Choose love always. and every moment. Choose love. Take that choice, and the correct action will follow. But first, you must say yes to love. Yes to love. Yes to our divinity. Yes to who we really are. So I want to end this morning from quoting a gentleman that those of us in New Thought, and I think the metaphysical side of the tracks, he's one of our ancestors, Carl Jung, who said, "I can only stand in deepest awe and admiration because the depths and heights of the soul, whose world is beyond space, hides immeasurable treasure." There's all kinds of definitions of the soul, but let's just, however you think about it. The soul. Is that where that voice comes from? Is that why we make that phone call? Is that why we go see a practitioner? Is that why we go see a counselor? Is that why, God, I need some help over here? Is that the soul? Yeah. All right. Namaste, everybody. Really appreciate it. Okay. Thank you.